Hello, boys and girls. Mr. Gemini wanted to come to you with a couple examples of how to write, construct, create, whatever fancy verb you want to use, equations, and then solve them when given a story problem. Let's take a look. Now, we did some of these in class today, so this is review, but it's also just good to see it again, maybe digest it a little more thoroughly. Renee is flying from Chicago, Illinois to Honolulu, Hawaii with a layover in Salt Lake City, Utah. The total flying distance of the trip is 4,243 miles one way. The flight from Salt Lake City to Honolulu is 2,994 miles. Write and solve an equation to find the flying distance from Chicago to Salt Lake City. Now we know she's going from Chicago to Honolulu. Starting place is Chicago, end destination's Honolulu. But she has a layover in Salt Lake City. So really, she's going from Chicago to Salt Lake City, and then from Salt Lake City to Honolulu. Now the total flying distance, that's what the entire trip is equal to, is 4,243 miles one way. So to get from Chicago to Honolulu without stopping at all, it would be 4,243 miles. Now, her flight from Salt Lake City to Honolulu is 2,994 miles. Write and solve an equation to find the distance from Chicago to Salt Lake City. Now, let's just talk about this. Many of you would probably say, hey, I'm going to take the total flight distance, which is 4,243 miles, and subtract from it the distance that she flew from Salt Lake City to Hawaii to get an answer. Now, this, unfortunately, is not an equation, but we can use this to construct an equation. Now, I like that we see that we're subtracting. We would subtract to solve the equation, but to write the equation, we use the inverse, because we've been talking about when I solve an equation, I use the inverse operation. So if I'm using subtraction to solve it, in my equation, I have the opposite, which is addition. Now, the problem is what am I adding together of these terms left over, or these two terms and the variable, to get my final answer? Well, I'm thinking this. We know the whole trip is equal to 4,243 miles. So we know that is equal, the whole trip's equal to this. Well, let's think about the part of the trips that are there. Oh, well, we know the first part is us flying from Chicago to Salt Lake City. We don't know that number. That's what we want to find. So I'm going to call that M. That's an unknown. And I'm going to add what it is then, if I think about this is the first leg of the trip, plus the second leg of the trip gives me the total trip. Now, we're going to add the second leg of the trip. The second leg of the trip is the 2,994 miles. Now I have an equation. I have a variable, I have an operation, and I have a whole number, a rational number, an integer, and it's equal to what the whole trip was. Now, if I want to solve this equation, I go about doing the inverse to solve it. So I see that the operation in this is addition. Well, the inverse addition is subtraction, so I minus 2,994 miles from both sides of the equation. And I'm going to get M being equal to, let's see, that becomes 13. I borrowed 10 from here. That becomes now 30. So now I have 13 minus, or 4 minus 13 is 9. I cannot take 9 from 30. I can't take, really, this becomes really a 90 because it's in the tens place. So I can't take 90 from 30. I cross out and borrow 100. So now I really have 100 here. I can now add the 100 here. So I really have 130 minus, because it's a tens place, minus 90, which gives me, hey, that's really 40. Can't take 900 from 100, so I need to borrow a group of 1,000. So this becomes really 300. I add a group of 1,000 here, so this really becomes 1,000. And this becomes really 900 because we're in the hundreds place. A little different to look at. Oops, 1, 2 zeros. So we have 1,000 minus 900. That really gives me 100. And 300 minus, or 3,000 minus 2,000 gives me 1,000. So that's 1,149 miles. Now, let's say I don't feel comfortable with my answer. I can always substitute it back in to check. So the check would be 1,149 plus 2,994. We go 9 plus 4 is 13. Regroup. We have 10, 40 plus 90 is 130 plus 1 is 140. So we put the 4 here in the tens place. 9, 10, let's see, 9, 10, 11, right? Oh, there's a mistake right there. What do we got here? What did we do wrong? Oh, there's my mistake. Look at that. I said this should really be 1100 because I had 1 there. So 1100 minus 900. Hey, that gives me 1249. See why we do a check? Well, I wonder if Mr. Jimmy did that on purpose to prove a point to why checking when I'm solving the equation really benefits me in the end, because I can find my mistakes much quicker. So we have 1249. Oh, look at that. Because that becomes a 2 here. Regroup the 110, and I have 4,243. So yes, now we have an answer. I'm going to go up here, write my equation. And remember, this is addition, so it is commutative. But also, too, with this equation, you could have had the two terms of 2,994 and m with the operation sign plus on the right side of the equation, and the total of the trip 4,243 on the left side if you wanted. I'm going to keep it that way. And now we know m is equal to 1,249 miles. All right. So the next one. Terrell bought a new television and VCR for his bedroom. The television was $137.18. More than the VCR. You can tell how old this question is because you guys don't even know what VCRs are. Write and solve an equation to find the total cost of the television if the VCR costs $109.75. Okay, so we bought a television, and the television was not $137.18. It was that added on to the price of the VCR. So if I figured out the price of the VCR, I added that, I would get, hey, the cost of the television. But over here it says, you know what, the VCR costs this much. So we need to write and solve an equation to figure out the cost of the television. Now, many of you are saying, oh, all I would do is I would just take, hey, $109.75 and add to it $137.18 to get the cost of the TV. But we know that's not an equation. But just like we did the last problem, we can do the inverse of this to figure out the answer. Excuse me. Well, the inverse, the opposite of addition, is subtraction. Now, what am I going to subtract here? I could subtract, hey, the total cost of the TV, which we don't know, but if I subtract $137.18 from the cost of the TV, I will get the cost of the VCR. So notice how I'm setting this equation up. I'm saying, hey, my right side of the equation has to do with the VCR. The left side has to do with all the TV info. Don't know the cost of the TV, but we know it's $137.18 more than the VCR, meaning if I subtracted it from the price of the TV, I'll get that VCR. Now, to solve this equation, I do the inverse of subtracting $137.18. I will add $137.18 to both sides. These cancel out. I should have done that over here too. This leaves me with t is equal to 8 plus 5 is 13. 7 plus 1 is 8 plus 1 is 9. Decimal point. 9 and 7 is 16. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 2 plus 2 is, or 1 plus 1 is 2. $246.93 is the cost of the television. Now, to check that out, I could always just substitute it back in. So we would hope that $246.93 minus $137.18, we do hope that that gives me $109.75. So this becomes a 13, that's a 5, this becomes an 8, that is a 7, that becomes a 16, that would become, what is that, a 0, right? Or 3, excuse me. I'm just thinking 3 minus 3 is 0. 10 minus 9, or 10 minus 7 is 3, right? Oh, it's a 16. See, I can't read my handwriting. 16 minus 7. 16 minus 7 is 9. 3 minus 3 is 0. 2 minus 1 is... Hey, look at that. Perfect check. So my equation up here goes like this. It's like this. We'd have t minus $137.18 is equal to $109.75. We then know that T equals $246.93. All right, hope that helps you out a little bit. And I want to take a look at this one right here. I'm going to ignore this one for right now. It says, on a trip from Indianapolis, Indiana to Houston, Texas, Mr. Sanchez averaged a speed of 63 miles per hour. So every hour he drove, he covered roughly 63 miles. The total distance of the trip was 1,071 miles. Right, and solve an equation, determine how long it would take Mr. Sanchez to drive from Indianapolis to Houston. Now, let's think here. I could do a couple of different operations. I could do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. To me, I'm thinking about, I want to figure out how many times this fits into this. Because if I'm going 63 miles per hour, I want to figure out how many times this goes into this. So I would say, wait a minute. I'm dividing to solve this, but I can't make an equation like this because that's not an equation. That's essentially a number sentence. But I can do the opposite of division, which is multiplication. Now, I'm really figuring out, hey, 63 miles per hour times, I'm going to use, I probably should use an H because I'm doing time here, times H is equal to 1,071. And look what happens. I'm doing the inverse of division. I'm doing multiplication, but then when I do my answer, I get my solution, I will divide. So I'll divide both sides by 63. Divide both sides by 63. So I'm left with H is equal to, I can't do this in my head. I'm going to do over here in this bigger space. 1,071 divided by 63. Okay, we go here. X, because 60 doesn't go into 1. 60 won't go into 10, but it will go into 107 one time. That gives me a 63. That's 1, because I just bring it down. 7 minus 3 is 4, I believe. And then this becomes a 10. This becomes a 0. 10 minus 6 is 4. How many times will 63 go into 441? I heard somebody say it. Yes, that is 7. 7 times 3 is 21. 7 times 6 is 42. Plus 2 is 44. Hey, look, we are good. So it's going to take him 17 hours, which does seem realistic. All right? And again, to check it, substitute the 17 back in here, and when I multiply them out, it should give me 1,071. I'm pressed for time here, so hope this helps you out. Take care, have a great weekend, and prepare for that test. See ya.